Hello. Yeah, I know it's awkward that I'm using a phone while wearing headphones, but go on. Oh, Lurrus is unbanned in Vintage. Oh, well, that's wonderful news. All right, talk to you later. Bye-bye. All right, folks, Phil Gallagher of ThrabenU here for one more Vintage video before we go and return to the normal Legacy content. So for anyone not following Magic super closely, yesterday there were, I believe, 14 bans across all format or something of that general nature, and Wizards did some major house cleaning. Notably, Lurrus of the Dream Den was unbanned in Vintage, and outside of things like manual dexterity cards, you don't ban cards in Vintage. You just restrict them, everyone gets one. But Lurrus was breaking things very badly as a companion, and so they had to ban it. But now that that companion rule is changed, maybe Lurrus is fine. And so I want to try shoving Lurrus into the existing Vintage Hatebears shell of some kind. And the first question is, which is better? Do you just play it in the main deck, or do you play it in the sideboard? And I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. So we're going to start by trying it as a 4 of in the main deck, which is almost certainly too many. Like, it's a legendary creature. It's very good, but that's probably too much. So we're going to start with trying it in the main deck, and then in the future, I'll probably try it in the sideboard as a companion as well. It's much worse when you have to take a turn off in order to put it into your hand, but it's still probably playable and still probably good. So we're going to try essentially the Hatebears shell that I 5-0'd with a week or two ago, and I've made some slight changes. I subbed one of the spirit guides for a Lotus Petal because you can rebuy Lotus Petal with Lurrus. I did some other minor tinkering as well, but the shell is mostly the same. I adjusted some of the 2-drops a little bit because I'm expecting a lot of other people to be playing Lurrus, and so I wanted more Thalias and Spirit of the Labyrinths to like either shut off card draw from Lurrus or just tax my opponent's effects as much as possible. The sideboard is kind of unexciting. It falls into a couple of categories. We have some Graveyard Hate, and there's also 2 Containment Priests in the main deck. I have a handful of cards that exist for, your things like PO and combo decks of that nature. And then we have a bunch of stuff for shops. That's essentially the various categories of hate that I have. I'm looking forward to playing this deck list. Also, just throwing it out there, Lurrus might be the thing that makes the shops matchup bearable for these sorts of decks, because it has lifelink. And, if you have a lifelinker and you keep putting +1/+1 counters on it, it's real hard to close out the game via aggression. All right, Vintage Peeps, one more time, I ask you, if you're enjoying the Vintage content, like, comment, subscribe, that sort of stuff. It really helps with the algorithm and helps people find my content. Let's battle. My first opening hand is what I would consider like a great legacy style hand, but I'm on the draw in Vintage. I don't think this is good enough. I'm going to try to find something with some acceleration. Keep. Probably keep. And I toss back one of my 2/3 drops. I have 2 different 2-mana Hatebears already. One of them might be critical to this game. If it gets countered, I'd like to be able to rebuy it with Lurrus, so I'm going to go ahead and toss the Archon. All right, the jig is up. What do you got for me, opponent? That would have been a great time to draw a piece of power. So maybe Jeskai Xerox is the most likely thing at this point. A little weird that my opponent didn't cantrip turn 1 if that's the case. Oh, alright, I guess they get Taxian probed. They cantripped. My opponent is thinking pretty hard about something. I think my Thalia comes down before my Spirit of the Labyrinth, but it really depends on what my opponent does this turn. Demo Tutor, Demo Tutor. Maybe Esper PO? Thalia and Spirit of the Labyrinth are both going to be great cards to play. And I don't really have enough information about my opponent's hand yet to know what they're going to tutor for. It could be something as simple as a Daze or Force of Will. But we'll see. My opponent's decisions are not snappy here. And let's try to mine some meaning from that. Could be that they're a combo deck and they're close to going off and they're trying to do math. It could be that they're unsure how they're going to beat multiple Hatebears if they can't go off next turn. All right, which one? I think I'm going to go with the Thalia. I think both cards are very good, and it's hard to tell which is going to be better. Awkward. Okay. Still going to cast it. It's mana neutral. My stuff is just resolving. Find this odd. Okay, sure. I guess my opponent is just a 4-color Xerox deck, and they're off to a little bit of a slow start. My spells are effectively uncounterable next turn because of the Thalia attacks. And if I didn't have Thalia, I could just, like, go Mox into Lurrus. Or sorry, I could just go, like, Mox, Lurrus, Spirit of the Labyrinth. It would be nuts against this board. So 100% of the time I do this. 100% of the time I'm playing Luminarch Aspirant. I might play Containment Priest on my opponent's turn, just to, like, mess with the combat math a little bit. There's also a world, though, where I play Containment Priest and put the counter on it this turn with Luminarch Aspirant to start making something that survives a Lightning Bolt. I kind of like that. If I just attack Dak for 2, they could take one of my Moxen and just let Dak go that way. I think that's fine. Notably, my Mox Jet can be used to cast Lurrus. I do have white available next turn if that ends up being something that matters. Alright, the Planeswalker's off the table, though. Plus, I have my opponent on a 2-turn clock before I even take Lurrus into account. Well, I guess that's not true. Like, I know they have the Lightning Bolt. Ooh. Alright, let's try to make the thing that lives through Lightning Bolt. I'll attack them with just that, because Monastery Mentor can become large. I guess, am I fine with trading? Yeah, I'm fine with trading a Mentor token and a Lightning Bolt for this, like, unquestionably. Now I'll lose the Lurrus, but if I'm left with Thalia plus Spirit plus Luminarch Aspirant, that's probably okay. Oh no, the Lightning Bolt is going after Thalia. Um, that seems to indicate that they have a different way to answer Lurrus. Ooh. Tinker for Bolas's Citadel, maybe? Alright, my opponent doesn't have a ton of life. So that won't actually draw them a card, but it lets them rearrange the top of their library for Bolas's Citadel, which is huge. These Pyroblasts doing some work. I'm not going to die this turn. But I also don't know that I come back from this position. Like, my opponent has effectively infinite blockers for next turn. I don't have anything with evasion. There's one creature in graveyard that they can eat. There's pretty likely to be two after. Oh, Time Walk. All right, Time Walk's legit. We can scoop to that. All right. What do I want to play here? Okay, so it might be better to do the sideboarding in this way. What don't I want from the main deck? I don't want these. The rest of the stuff that I have is reasonable. What's awkward here is that, like, Sanctum Prelates are good. Shutting off all those 1-drops is really strong, but then again, this sort of stuff is also pretty good. Because taking out the early Deathrite Shaman and destabilizing their mana is totally fine. And while Mentor's restricted, anytime they have it, it is really spooky. I think I'm going to go with the non-bow and play both of those. I think I'm good with that. I'm not 100% comfortable with the mana base of my opponent's deck to know whether or not it's better to play Path or Swords, but I'm guessing they have at least one basic. Like, they're greedy, but with how common, like, Ghost Quarter and Assassin's Trophy are in this format, I can reasonably expect that they have at least one basic. Yeah, well, this'll do fine. This is also a hand that a Lurrus will just make that shit insane. Okay, order of operations. I probably Thalia first. Alright, now Archon or Sanctum Prelate, and I get to do one, and it more or less needs to win me the game. Both probably do that. I'm gonna go with Archon. Like, these two together make it really hard for my opponent to, like, get initial mocks in play and things of that nature. Deathrite Shaman is the best thing my opponent could have here. Land? Not land. Okay. A lightning bolt effect from my opponent is going to be very strong. They bolt Archon. They attack in. They pay 1 mana. They bolt Thalia. See if they have it naturally. If they don't have it naturally, they can't do everything in one turn cycle. Yep. That's unfortunate. Maybe I should have just jammed the Prelate on one. But, like, the Archon stopping all of the, like, Deathrite Shaman style openers from happening is really good in a different universe. And the Archon still did a ton of work with all of those things coming into play tapped. They're still fine if I draw a land. If I don't draw a land, this one probably slips away. Rough. Alright, I think I'll lose now. If push comes to shove, my opponent can also just, like, attack in with Arcanist and Nature's Claim their own Mox Pearl, and that buys them 2 turns. Or they can just draw 6 cards. They get the next draw 3 next turn. Okay. So, the good news is that if I do draw a land, I can go land, Lurrus, Black Lotus, Sanctum Prelate. And that is an exceptionally powerful turn. But a Force of Will or Force of Negation breaks me here. Otherwise, my Cat Nightmare will do real strong stuff. What is this? Ooh. I don't think I beat that. Mostly because of the life gain. I'm at 27? Alright. I guess I'll stick it out. This is the point where I think the game is lost. But my opponent's at 7. I'm at 27. Things can happen. Also, like, now that I'm looking at their mana base, maybe they don't actually have a basic. Also, I'm somewhat surprised that they think that the Thalia tax is relevant when they have that much mana. Like, I guess they have 7 cards and an Ancestral that they can fire back. That's brave. I don't know. It probably doesn't matter very much what they do from here. Like, as long as they can counter this Lurrus, they're very favored. I will concede if they find their mentor, because that is something I won't come back from. Until then, though, we can pretend like we're still alive. Yeah, that's very good against me. And that's stabilization at a much faster clock. In addition to the Oko invalidating abilities, Lavinia means that, like, I'm not going to be able to play the zero cost stuff from Graveyard. I think I'm comfortable throwing in the towel here. Yeah, we would have drawn the land, but Lavinia's first clause here is really, or sorry, second clause is really good here. Whenever opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter it. All right, GG. That loss was probably on me for not just ramming Sanctum Prelate out there on turn 1, but like there's stuff like this and this, and just like Tinker that are still a really big deal that Archon plays well against. I don't know. All right, I'll be keeping my opening hand for round 2. I am on the play. Um, it's really tough which one of the bears I lead on. The answer is not Containment Priest, but all of the rest have like very valid reasons why you would want to lead on that one and not the others. I think I'm going to try leading on Arbiter. Stopping fetch lands is really strong. Opponent says, oh no, no more shops, I see. Yeah, I get around. And then Thalia is better against these sorts of starts. Ugh. Super punished for not leading on Thalia. Whatever I play this turn costs me my Lotus Petal. Probably needs to be Spirit of the Labyrinth. Spirit of the Labyrinth has 3 power. It can trade with Lodestone Golem. We do shut off Golos here. Just a giant Stonecoil Serpent. Alright, so non-artifact spells cost more, so this is no good for me. And that Stonecoil Serpent is going to kill me dead in 3 turns, even if Lodestone Golem doesn't get in the red zone. Yeah, that's fine. How am I getting out of this? Like, do I have outs to that Stonecoil Serpent in the main deck? Lurrus's lifelink isn't going to be fast enough. My opponent has mana to pay with Kataki. Yeah, I think I'm just dead here. I'm going to go ahead and throw in the towel. Stops the natural predator of these sorts of decks. Alright. Removal spells, get in here. Relic Warders, get in here. What are my worst cards? Sanctum Prelate, unquestionably bad here. Like, it's a little hard to cast that on turn 1. Containment Priest is just a flash creature. That can go. This is what we're looking to beat the opponent with. Like, Lurrus plus Luminarch Aspirant. That's the plan. Thalia's first strike is good against some, but not all of the critters. Oh, there's also Arbiters. Arbiters suck. Alright, let's go Arbiters out, and I can keep one. Well, if they're Golos, though. I'll keep one. If I win and learn that they're a Golos build, might adjust. Uh, too much mana? Probably too much mana. I have good cards for the match, but I could just get bowled over keeping this. This hand doesn't have white, which is a problem, but it has nice tools. I'm going to go ahead and keep this. Toss back the Arbiter. Go Mox, Plains, and then Thalia to tax their artifact mana. Then hopefully I can like play Aspirant and Wasteland a Workshop. Yet. Very good. I believe Wastelanding this is more important than putting the Aspirant into play. I think ultimately I will be the beatdown this match. Go ahead and attack on in. Strong. A little bit of an anemic game on both sides. Oh wow, a basic. That's really good to know about for the future, though. We don't need to Relic Order this Revoker. That's not what we're looking to hit with this. We're looking to hit something that stabilizes the board. And Phyrexian Revoker does not stabilize the board. Do I have any cats in? I have one cat in. I might want to consider taking it out next time. Alright, this is a turn where I can think about Relic Ordering this. It nets me 1 point of damage this turn. And 3 more next turn, assuming my opponent doesn't play another creature. I think that's officially enough damage where I do it. I put a counter here to better play around Walking Ballista. Three, four, five, six, seven, eight. So this is lethal next turn if my opponent doesn't put another body on the board. Nice. Okay. On the draw. Leon and Arbiter out. Payment Priest in. On the draw, I'd like a slightly more defensive hand. All the restricted cards, but nothing to do with this mana. Spirit of Labyrinth is not an ideal card for this matchup. Has no white mana. Oh no. My opponent has also gone to 5. I don't know that I'm supposed to go to 4. I'm gonna go ahead and keep this. I don't think going fast is what's important this game. I'm gonna toss back a Lotus Petal for that reason. And then I think I'm just gonna toss back 1 land. I assume that I'm going to need to Wasteland on turn 1. Oh no. Alright, GG. We lost. That's okay. Yep. Like, I'll play on, because, like, Mana Crypt is currently my win condition. And it's possible that Mana Crypt kills my opponent. But my opponent should win this game. Unless... they're not willing to, like, change the top of their library with their Mystic Forge. This is very good for me. So they do have a swamp. I want to do this in their upkeep. Draw step better, give them a chance to draw the swamp. I might win this one yet. Ooh. Alright. I put pressure in play, and next turn I can put pressure with evasion into play. My opponent is not getting particularly lucky with flips here. Ooh, buddy. There's a very good chance that I steal this one. My opponent can take their Mana Crypt out of play. You know, it's probably hard to do that with, like, this Archon sitting on the table, though. Woohoo! Ooh, GG's. Wow. I'm really happy to get that one. I thought we were dead for sure once my opponent went Lotus into Mystic Forge. Okay, so my hand is really awkward. I have a turn 1 Spirit of the Labyrinth and 4 mana on turn 1, but I can't actually cast any of these Sanctum Prelates because I don't have white. I'm not sure whether or not this is supposed to be a keep. I'm on the draw. I'm going to keep this on the draw. Because I think with any other creature, this hand becomes extremely good, or with a white source, this becomes extremely good. And since both of those things are, like, coinciding, that means most of my draws outside of, like, Spirit Guides are probably, fuck me, are probably pretty good. Alright, So our Moxen now don't do anything. I have really good tools for this matchup if I rip lands. I was not necessarily expecting this to happen. Alright, that's pretty good. Just gonna, like, cantrip for my opponent twice, maybe find, like, Force of Will to protect their board. Alright, just a preordain. That's fine. Land? Oh, yes. Notably, Narset cantrips through Spirit of the Labyrinth. Not sure if I'm supposed to block with Spirit of the Labyrinth if my opponent attacks. That's a really interesting question. It turns their cantrips back on, but then I get 3 more mana. Maybe not this turn. I'm theoretically on board with it in a future turn, though. Would like a Thalia. I get a Thalia into play. I can pay the Thalia tax and then cast my Moxen, because these things only get countered if no mana is spent on the spell. Okay. So I know 2 of my opponent's 4 cards. Arbiter versus Aspirant. My opponent's just going to fetch in response. So I'm not going to get them with Arbiter. Shut off a Tinker and future fetch lands. I think I'm going to need this in play at some point in this game to help stabilize the board. Alright, so the Brainstorm's gone. I know they have Preordain +1 mystery card. Getting Sanctum Prelate into play is going to be so important here. Just shutting off, like, string of cantrips, burying me in a small number of creatures, while also having a 2/2 that can profitably block. Yeah, I can't really block the Lavinia this turn. Gonna go ahead and eat that damage. Hopefully draw a land. What is this? Merchant Scroll? Red Horde? Alright, land is so incredibly strong. My opponent is going to convert Preordain into 1 elemental token. Yes. Opponent's turn 1 on the play. Lavinia. So good. Because Sanctum Prelate would have just been absolute gas against everything that's going on over there. I have to start thinking about what I'm going to do with the second Sanctum Prelate. I guess I don't need to start thinking about that now. This effect is probably more important to get into play. Spirit? Maybe the Aspirant? It's, like, very close. No, the Spirit. Then it can block Arcanist and live, while also killing it. Alright, I didn't get Swords to Plowshares there. That's the good news, because Swords to Plowshares into Swords to Plowshares, or, like, Lightning Bolt into Lightning Bolt, like, devastates me. Alright, so they can find a Swords to Plowshares here, eat my entire board, and I am effectively dead. Not literally, because it takes 2 attacks to kill me, but that would be absolutely insurmountable. Okay, this is good. That less so. Cat doesn't do much. It's a 3/3 blocker if this hits play. But again, a single removal spell does me in. I need to resolve Sanctum Prelate. It's also pretty likely that my opponent has Force of Will if they didn't find either a like Lightning Bolt or Swords to Plowshares. I don't even think the first Sanctum Prelate that I cast is going to resolve. Yeah, I don't think I don't think they want that back. Okay. I get to try. I assume this is just hardcast Force of Will since they blew that Mystic Sanctuary. Put this on Luminarch Aspirant. Then it gets slightly better at blocking tokens. Lurrus's lifelink also may end up being relevant here. Okay, well you do draw one card off of that. It does replace itself there. Getting a little lucky here. Cutting my opponent off of mana doesn't really matter here. Whereas next turn, like playing Lurrus followed by Aspirant might matter. Okay, they're just fueling their graveyard there. Fair. Well, name one. Okay. So next turn, Lurrus starts coming in and starts doing Lurrus things. I go ahead and spread those out a little bit. Let's set a stop on my draw step. There is a world where I might end up wastelanding in the draw step to play around a hardcast Force of Will. After my opponent replays that land that I already know that they have. Yeah, since I miss out on playing Lurrus plus something from graveyard this turn, I think this play is good. Alright. We're going to play Lurrus, and we're going to start putting counters on Lurrus so that my opponent can't really attack in easily. The way that I'm currently planning on winning this game is via Archon. I'll put a bunch of counters on that, and that'll just kind of do my opponent in. I can get rid of this stop on my turn now. Another Sanctum Prelate? Or just another Aspirant? Another Sanctum Prelate's probably better. Oh, right, it's 3 or less. Or 2 or less. Then let's grab another Aspirant. Alright, buckle up. So I need 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-ish toughness before the Lurrus can attack in. That's only a couple turns. I can also start just like attacking with some of this stuff, since they can just come back with Lurrus. But I don't know that I need to do that. See if my opponent remembers about Arbiter later. I often find that the answer is no. What about now? Now am I comfortable? And just swing in this 3/3. Yeah, let's start swinging in some creatures. That's not even fetching. Wrong. Also, opponent forgot about Arbiter. Called shot. Good to know for later. Opponent does have a basic. All right, can the Lurrus get in there? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Probably not yet. Next turn feels safe. I guess there's very few things I need to play around here. Attack you. Attack you. I think as long as I'm sitting on this Lurrus, I can't lose. Or at least I haven't figured out a way that I can lose yet. Don't have a Thalia. But I'd rather just, like, virtually draw a card by playing this than play a new card. Alright, and we get there. I think I'm going to do the weird thing where, like, I bring in both Sanctum Prelate and some amount of the 1-mana removal. Because, like, Kataki's not good, and Containment Priest is not good, so that's 4 easy cuts. Most of the rest of my cards are good, though, so maybe I don't play Path. I could also trim either Thalia or Arbiter on the draw. Um, Island complicates this a bit. I think on the draw, I want a couple additional answers. I'm going to trim Thalia on the draw, and I think I'm going to play Thalia's over paths when I'm on the play. My opponent has mulligan their initial hand, and I'm going to do the same. My hand's very fair. Hand's also very fair. But is that acceptable on 6? It might be acceptable on 6. This is a really bad hand on the draw. Like, turn 2 Arbiter on the draw does nothing. I'm going to ship this. Fuck. Alright. Nope. Alright, so a force of will is going to wreck me, but otherwise, this is disgusting. This is Lotus, Lurrus, Lotus into a card of my choosing. One of these goes back for sure. I don't know that I actually keep the strip mine. Maybe I do. Yeah, I'm gonna keep the strip mine. I've been this, and then I'm doing one of these as my follow-up to Lurrus. I think I want the Spirit of the Labyrinth. Please don't just play fetch. Fuck. That's very bad too. Like now my opponent knows what's up. They know like both that they need to play around strip mine, and if they have the possibility to find a counterspell, they need to do it at all costs this turn. That was very bad for me. Uh, Now like lightning bolt or swords to plowshares and beat this Lurrus. Yeah, no bueno. Oh, I like this. All right. So I blow that up. Cast Black Lotus. Yep. All right. That's fair. We almost like instantly recovered from our mulligan to 4. We'll play a couple of embarrassing turns like this. My opponent ancestraled, and that got them out of their mulligan. Of course, it will sets them back a bit, but they're still like incredibly far ahead of where I'm at. Unless they just like don't hit a second land drop, and then I rip a white source, and Arbiter comes down. Like, there's worlds where I'm still in this, but I'm very far behind. Especially that Ponder didn't shuffle. Time to concede? It feels like time to concede. Yeah, it's time to concede. Like, Ancestral in the graveyard there is so strong. I'll see if I draw a white source this turn, because then, like, Spirit of the Labyrinth happens. No. Alright, I'm gonna concede here. I think the only reason to keep playing that game from that position is to try to, like, drag down my opponent's clock. Alright, on the draw, I'm gonna go Paths out, Thalia's in. Actually, maybe I trim Archons and keep Path. This makes my beginning game stronger, because my end game's already good because of Lurrus. I'll buy that. Okay. It's a weird one. And it's a hand that's very bad against, like, Moxen. But this hand has a definite plan. I like hands that have plans. That's very important for the non-blue decks of both Legacy and Vintage. You can't just keep a hand hoping that it's going to get better most of the time. Like, you have to figure out what you're going to be doing from turn 1 if you want to succeed. Alright, it's stuck. We'll see how devastating it is. the third game in a row that my opponent has had the Gataxian Probe. That is a restricted card. That's a little annoying. Okay, my opponent had a land. Try to sneak in these 2 points of damage. The worst case scenario is that my opponent has Swords to Plowshares now and has a counterspell. And I think I'm just going to wasteland my opponent in their upkeep. Best play around that worst case scenario. Okay, I think you should have done that on my turn if you had it. Now my opponent fetches in response. They can maybe get a Valk. They might have another removal spell for this. Oh, nope. They might have another Swords to Plowshares then. That's pretty annoying. Mostly because, like, both of my cards have been removed by Swords to Plowshares, so they're not going to exile. Sorry, they're not going to graveyard. What's the plan? Am I feeding 2 creatures to Dreadhorde Arcanist? I think I'm feeding 2 creatures to Dreadhorde Arcanist. And then hoping I can take over the game with Lurrus as this one goes long. A little frustrating that I constrained my opponent's mana so well this game, but like Gataxian Probe allowed them to like plot out the perfect sequence so that they still got to like fetch appropriately. Then like they also had Dreadhorde Arcanist all without casting any selection spell. Like that's not the end of the world or anything, but yeah, it's frustrating from my end. I guess I should not F6 in case my opponent plays Lavinia specifically. Rough. Actually, that's not too bad. Like, my opponent draws 2. He's good. But it's not like they have a Planeswalker in play that they can, like, leverage for onboard advantage. That's very good. That's better than the time walk, honestly. Now this starts to loot things into the graveyard for the Arcanist to flashback. Containment Priest, huh? Alright, well, Sanctum Prelate's very good. I F6 through my turn. Uh, I could have cast that off of Elvish Spirit Guide, and I should have. Um, yeah, that might have cost me if my opponent didn't have a force effect in their cards there. Maybe I take over this game. Now they get like one more look at a card from their draw step and one more look from that. My brain mentally went, oh, plus 2 more looks for deck. They didn't, yeah. Might have cost myself that one there. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and pack it in there. Let's see what the next couple of draws would have looked like. Not particularly strong things coming. I would have lost this one in a drawn-out battle anyway, I think. Like, if my opponent already has access to this card, like, that bounces the Sanctum Prelate, and then they can play a whole bunch of cantrips. Yeah, I'm losing that one there, even if I play optimally with what's on top of the library coming. Okay, I am on the draw for this game. I have no white mana. I'm going to go ahead and mulligan. This hand is quite strong. I'll be keeping this. And all of my cards are good, and that makes it slightly difficult to figure out what to do. If I toss back the plains, I can't Sanctum Prelate or Lurrus. Well, I guess I could technically Lurrus. I can't Sanctum Prelate, which is kind of a big deal. But I think I am going to go ahead and do that. Strip Mine is also a card that punishes me for this line. I think keeping a good mix of mana sources plus Hatebears gives me the best generic chance of winning this game. Not sure which bear to play on one. I think it's Thalia. Well, Thalia's effect is kind of emulated by Archon. Kind of. Maybe I'll play Spirit. Thalia is better against removal. Spirit is better against more cantrips. Opponent got to pitch their dead mental misstep here. That's a big win for them. Hmm. So if my opponent has a removal spell, whatever I do falls apart here. They don't have a removal spell. I have a real chance. I'm going to make it so that they have to have like removal spell plus land. I'm going to go for Wasteland plus Thalia. And I'm going to Wasteland first to see if they gush. They can still ponder this turn, but they can't ponder and remove my creature. So this ponder can find a removal spell that makes next turn devastating. Alright, what's the play? Do I play Luminarch Aspirant, which can like potentially resolve and lock down Arcanist, or do I play Spirit of the Labyrinth, which is like a better hate bear in a vacuum, but the 2-for-1 of my opponent having a removal spell stings more? Hard to say. I think I lose this game if my opponent found a removal spell with that ponder. Expect my opponent to fetch here. Nope. I found 2 cards I liked off the ponder. That's bad news for me. Yep. Alright. This game likely falls apart from here. The Luminarch Aspirant can potentially get larger than Dreadhorde Arcanist and get out of range of another Lightning Bolt. But they don't do it immediately, which is sort of the problem. Alright, is Archon of Emeria better? Archon of Emeria still gets bolted. Yeah, Archon of Emeria is better to play maximum mana efficiency. And then next turn, if I draw a mana source, I can double Aspirant. Alright, so now my opponent can't get a white source unless they draw a Mox and Swords to Plowshares in the same turn cycle. They can still find a fetch land and then 2-for-1 me next turn again. Well, maybe not next turn. Maybe it takes the following turn cycle. It would just be a great time to draw something like a Sanctum Prelate. Not casting the Preordain, huh? I guess if I Archon, I can't double spell, right? That's how that works. Try to do Archon around a Bolt. Alright, Archon is going to sit here and keep this Dreadhorde Arcanist from attacking. A Wasteland would be a really cool draw, so that when my opponent fetches Tundra, I can Wasteland that and not give them access to white. Really like that. Nice. Now it's Swords to Plowshares, Swords to Plowshares. Hold up, do they not have it? They don't have it. Now they can't cast another spell. Nice! That's very good for me. I feel like I have gotten incredibly lucky here. Lurrus is good. Is Aspirant better? If my opponent... It's possible they messed up and they do have, like, Swords to Plowshares. I think I'm going to try to take advantage of this lull in my opponent's board state to put a second Aspirant into play and diversify some counters. Trying to make another creature that is going to be larger than Lightning Bolt. Dig through time. Notably, they can't use this last mana to cast a Source of Plowshares because of Archon, so I think they should have left one card in their graveyard. They theoretically have Mystic Sanctuary in their deck, so I think they should have left the Time Walk in their graveyard. That was a misplay. Sure. They're dead on board unless they find a Swords of Plowshares. I have 3, 6, 7, plus 2 counters, 8, 9. Yeah. I'm going to follow kind of the same general guidelines as before. Go Containment Priest and Kataki's out, and then trim a couple of cards. I'm still not sure on like Arbiter versus Archon versus Thalia. Maybe Arbiter's just worse on the draw. Like, I don't know. Like, you can trim the card that's slower versus the card that's easier to cast on turn 2. This is more of an impact card. And this gets better with Aspirant more quickly. It's also possible on the draw that I could just play Rest in Peace as a generic catch-all answer to their graveyard. Rest in Peace is awkward with Lurrus, huh? Maybe that shouldn't be in my deck. Yeah, let's not play Rest in Peace next time. Play a couple of Tormod's Crypts. I think I'm gonna keep this hand. Like, this hand isn't really great in a vacuum, but so many things off the top improve it that I think I'm willing to keep it. I'm counting Wasteland as more of a spell than a land here. All right. That's not what I want. All right. I go Mox. I'm gonna go Lotus. Triple white. Path to exile this. Play Aspirant, Wasteland them. A little committal, but I think I like it. This makes it look like Path to Exile is the bait spell too, so this is more likely to resolve when this is actually the payoff spell. It's a little awkward wastelanding them after giving them a land, but I have cut them. Well, I shouldn't say I've cut them off both, but they have access to neither red nor white mana right now, which are their removal colors. Fair. Won't be showing that wasteland this turn. I'm going to manually click through combat here. See if we can squeeze in 3 points of damage, even if my opponent does have the lightning bolt. Oh. They either don't or they're not willing to use it yet. I need another turn cycle for Aspirant to be out of lightning bolt range. And then my opponent's down to 3, maybe 4 Swords to Plowshares to answer it. Lotus Petal? Really? Other Wasteland not doing Wasteland things right now. Not going to attack with it this turn. Just want to hold it back so that my opponent can't safely attack in. But again, a removal spell is really devastating for me here. Well, specifically, a Swords to Plowshares is really devastating. My opponent eats the Aspirant, then attacks and eats the Arbiter, or vice versa. This is stressful. Fuck. Yep. Got a handful of answers or effective answers to this thing, and my opponent's low-ish on cards right now. That Lotus Petal really saved their bacon if they... Well, I guess they had that Scalding Tarn too. Am I just playing this? I'm probably just playing this. It at least makes them commit an extra mana to trying to answer it. But life is really bad for me right now. I'm not going to wasteland them because there's a world where my Thalia ends up dying, and I want to play Lurrus and rebuy it in the same turn cycle. Like, I could wasteland them in combat, but I don't think that does a ton of good right now. Now, if my opponent fetches and, like, then maybe I take them off a color, we can talk. Set a stop in my draw step from here on out. The reason being hardcast Force of Will. My opponent has exactly that amount of mana right now. Can't ever just be a brick for a turn or two. I'll let them keep the Tundra. They can just fetch another. Like, they've only used one Tundra so far. I'm not running them out of mana here. Really? I have 4 Lurrus in my deck, though. Now I might snap off this Wasteland on Tundra. Now I know they, like, can't have Gush. And now I know that they are valuing their, like, Tundras incredibly highly. Wish some of these were in graveyard. Well, kind of. I guess they would have gotten surgical, but Lurrus into pullback Black Lotus is not exactly what I'm looking for here. Hmm. One top, one bottom. I don't actually know if that's better than looting and filling their graveyard. I very much doubt that it is. If I play this out, this gets Swords to Plowshared, then that's out of the graveyard, and then maybe the next thing can actually stick. But I think this Mox doesn't matter to me, and this Mox doesn't matter to my opponent. But any card in graveyard that is a 1-drop is so good for my opponent right now. I shouldn't really win from here. I'm not technically dead, but I think this is like garbage time, and I should probably just concede for entertainment value. I would play this one out if it was just me, but the YouTube channel doesn't need to see this. Alright, on the play, do I want the Arbiters back in? Maybe. Would I play Arbiter or Thalia on turn 1 versus this deck? On the play. Maybe Arbiter. Maybe I should drop down Thalia's. Try to squeeze the mana from a different angle. Alternatively, maybe it's more important to have a turn 1 play than to have something that's slightly better in the end game. Because again, I've got like this pile of Lurruses. This has no turn 1 play. I'm going to ship it. One's not good either. Man, this sucks. I have to put back 2 of these. Is it aggro time? Just play Aspirant into Aspirant, hope it works. I don't think the turn 2 Archon is super impressive. Actually, yeah. Yeah, I think this is an aggro hand. Which is not where I want to be. But it can play around lightning bolts pretty well. It's just going to be soft to Swords to Plowshares, just like the last hand was. That's fine. That doesn't cast a removal spell. That's better than playing another aspirant. My opponent doesn't have the appropriate colors yet. It'll be a little tilting if the aspirant gets lightning bolted this turn, though. Although I guess, like, this getting countered would have meant that the lightning bolt was still live. That was top. That's not good. Why was that top and you're missing your land drop? How does that make any sense? I'm not going to play this out because of Dak Vaden. Is it balance? Is balance what makes that make sense? Like Black Lotus into balance? Maybe I do play out the Ruby then. That way my opponent has to go down to no cards in hand if they do balance. I'm just so confused. Like if my opponent goes land balance and discards down to no cards, that sucks for me, but it's not game over. Why the hell did they top with Preordain? Cast Spirit Guide, put the counter on it so that I can turn it into a 4/4 next turn. And then it plays around Lightning Bolt. I miss one immediate point of damage this turn. But I think the potential of creating something that lives through lightning bolt is pretty important right now. All right. Any answer to that card would be great. Not a thing you need to do at instant speed. That's a thing you should have done in my draw step. Like, those plays were so bad, and it's just not gonna matter because it's Dreadhorde Arcanist that's unchecked. But my opponent thinned 3 dead draws out of my deck there, giving me more chances to hit an answer to this. It's not exactly an answer, but it's not bad. That means at least the Aspirant can get another counter on it this turn. And then attack in for 3 next turn. Another Spirit of the Labyrinth would be a pretty sick draw. Because then I can have 2 different things with 3 power that trade with Dreadhorde. That's pretty awful. Play it. Probably don't play it. Yeah, my opponent has 3 cantrips left over in the graveyard after they swords this creature. I need a swords, a path, or a sanctum prelate ASAP. Also, again, it's super frustrating that Lurrus is my endgame, and I have 9-ish creatures in exile right now. I'll do this on my opponent's turn. And now I'll play out the Caracas. Also frustrating is that if I played out the game, what was that, game 2, that I just conceded early, I probably could have timed this opponent out. Why is that in your deck? Why is that in your deck post sideboard? Like, I know it's very good in this spot, but the number of times you can actually get that to do that thing is so incredibly rare. This is very tilting. I also can't have 6 because, like, I know Lavinia is in this deck. This is actually an incredibly good draw because it's a creature that I can bounce with Caracas. So I can just play this game, and this game of, like, Thalia, bounce Thalia every turn likely ends up eating a lot of time from my opponent. I basically need them to not find Mentor. Mentor is the card that can cause them to win this game within 3 minutes easily. I don't care if they find a Lavinia. Like, that additional 2 power isn't going to matter a ton. Just Mentor plus cantrip spam. That'll beat me. I'm not even worried about most of the planeswalkers here. This is a very tedious match of Vintage. Yeah, Exhibit A about Lurrus being the end game here. I'm not going to show them the Lurrus yet, even though the Lurrus is technically better. Thalia's taxation is probably pretty annoying here. Yeah, and they're going to take that Swords to Plowshares out of their graveyard. Wonderful. Now, if this gets lightning bolted, I still have the Lurrus in the hole. Yeah, a second one of those doesn't really matter. That's actually probably favorable for me. That's just more stuff for my opponent to click through. I'm not going to cast Thalia this turn. It's just better to leave up Caracas. My opponent has Force Blue card. Oh, Surgical Extraction on Thalia. Deal. I was not casting that anyway. Take out the Tundra there, make it a little bit harder for them to do, like, the same trick as before. I unfortunately don't have anything to bring back with Lurrus. So they can attack, target Lightning Bolt. Oh, they're just gonna target Preordain? I can block and kill that Arcanist then. Plus, I gain 3 life in doing so, which is very relevant when my opponent has 50 seconds left on clock. So, in case this is like the first time you are watching vintage content, it is not usually this boring. I do I do apologize for this. Usually the games are like very fast paced, very interesting, lots of wiggle room back and forth, and this one came down to me timing out my opponent. Alright, and this is just where my opponent is gonna sit there and let themselves time out. Alright. GG. Okay, we're on the draw for this one with a pretty strong opening hand. The turn 2 Archon, after playing a relevant turn 1 card, is probably pretty strong. I can also consider just playing the Archon on 1. We'll kind of see how things go here. My hand is considerably worse if my opponent does something like Spheres or Lavinias on turn 1 and my Mox and get turned off. Alright, what are we thinking about, opponent? I don't have anything to banter about yet. Drop into Noble Hierarch, so we're probably playing against the Bant Archon deck. Means Daze is something that I should be thinking about. Oh, please don't give me another round versus a glacially slow opponent. Oh god. Here we go. Are you like double queuing or something? 'Cause otherwise this is just like pretty ridiculous. Why did they pause 2 times in a row? Days doesn't make sense as the second pause. I can Wasteland them and guarantee deny them a mana. I can Arbiter and maybe deny them a mana. Can't double spell next turn basically under any circumstances unless I draw another white source. What do I want in play if my opponent casts Collector Oof? I want Archon in play if they do that. Nice. This turn's a little tricky. I think I'm going to Wasteland pre-combat and Arbiter post-combat. No, I'm going to Wasteland end of combat. I'm just going to take them down to 1 open mana. I think there's kind of very little difference in what I leave them with here. Since like Noble Hierarch is a 3-color mana dork that I'm unlikely to remove in this game. Same play as last turn? I think same play as last turn. Except now I can also attack with another creature. Strip Mine better than Tundra? Strip Mine blows up my planes, and then I can't cast white spells. Another Archon? No, let's stack up this effect. So notably, each player, me too, can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. So we don't get to play our jet here. Okay, good stuff. What do we want versus this deck? I want to board in 4-ish cards. Most of the rest of the stuff that's here is fine. I think I'm gonna bring in the Prelates and the Swords to Plowshares. Let me do a quick check. I believe my Bant Archon list that I ran had a basic. Yeah, I had a basic forest in that one. No basic in the other one, so about half the time Path to Exile is free, and the other half it's very much not. Let's start out like this. I don't know if like what we had just like dodged what my opponent was doing, but it kind of seems to me like my opponent should have mulliganed. They did not appear to be playing Vintage. Like the only spell they cast last game was a Noble Hierarch, right? Like yeah, they cast a Noble Hierarch and then played 3 lands and died. My opponent tanking on whether or not they want to play first. A very difficult decision. This is one of those leagues where I either do infinite amounts of recording or I just say like, sorry YouTube viewers, this is what's happening right now. I'm gonna mulligan this hand. I can't really cast my spells. This one is a banger though. Snow-covered plains will be going back here. And then like Pearl Emerald, this casts Lurrus. So I already have white. Collector Oof is very good against this hand though. Okay, now they're doing vintage things. Yeah, this is gonna be fine. So my swords to plowshares effectively got a 2-for-1. I don't think I need to play strip mine yet, but I think I will. Because if my opponent like fetches to cast something like a brainstorm or something like that, I want to be able to strip mine a land immediately. Uh... Please. Like, if opponent is just, like, lagging or something, and this is not their fault, that's fine, because that happens to people on Magic Online. But this is, suboptimal. Yeah, your Archon is fine. Like, I'll just find a Luminarch Aspirant, and then I'm totally good. Oh, like, it's beautiful. What do I want to attack with this turn? The Lurrus gains me life. Turn it into a 4/3. Yeah, that's fine. All right. So let's debrief this. What did I learn over the course of this league? Lurrus was fine, but unexciting, and there were a couple of different reasons for that. So number one was that I played against a whole bunch of Jeskai or like Jeskai Plus decks that had Swords to Plowshares base removal. And when my early Hatebears were Swords to Plowshared, when I had a Lurrus, I didn't necessarily have food to bring back. So I had 20 main deck creatures plus 7 things that may or may not hit the graveyard consistently. So let's ignore the Moxen and count it as like 22, counting Black Lotus and Petal. I had 22 things that Lurrus can bring back. And like that seems like a fine number. But if those things when they die aren't going to the graveyard, then that's not necessarily the card advantage engine that I want and the game. And based on this league, I don't know if I even want to play Lurrus. Like, it's fine. It's an option. I like having access to it, but like Lurrus did not feel overpowered. Like, Lurrus was a card that did things. Putting counters on it so it could gain more life was sweet. I did occasionally rebuy a couple of things. It was pretty good. I did have that one busted Black Lotus start, but unfortunately my opponent had the force for Lurrus there, so it didn't work out. And so then that leaves you like wondering, like, should I just play this as a companion? But as we've been seeing, like Archon of Emeria and Sanctum Prelate are really good, like really, really good. And playing those things early is backbreaking. And like removing these cards from the deck list, I think leaves you playing something that is not of vintage power level in order to play Lurrus. Which, as we saw this game, like Lurrus, while good, is not insane by any stretch of the imagination. So I think moving forward, I would still want to play Lurrus, but maybe 4 is just the wrong number, or maybe like you could do something like play 2 of them main deck and 2 of them sideboard. So for example, doing something like moving these to the sideboard and moving these to the main deck is totally fine. And I think that might be a starting point that I would take. The other thing that I noticed halfway through the league was like Rest in Peace plus Lurrus together is probably not the ideal plan, so maybe I should be thinking about a different piece of Graveyard Hate over Rest in Peace. Rest in Peace is really strong. Like, I really like it versus some of the decks in the format, but maybe if I'm going to play a playset of Lurrus, that Tormod's Crypt is just a card that should be in those slots instead. Generally speaking, I did like the feel of the sideboard. I felt like I had roughly the right number of cards for each one of the matchups, although we did kind of play against the same sort of stuff in most of these rounds. All right, anyway, folks, I hope you enjoyed this. If you do, consider like, commenting, subscribing, help the old channel grow, and vintage folks, if you made it this far, consider doing a donation deck list. As of tomorrow, I will be going back to work in person, and some of my time is going to be a little more taxed, so I would love to be spending some of that doing vintagey stuff. All right, have a great rest of the day. See ya.